Previously on the UFTA Files.
In 1969, the Air Force closed Project Blue Book, having cataloged 12,618 UFO sightings and assessing 701 of them as unidentified, yet ultimately concluding that 1. No UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force was ever an indication of threat to our national security. 2. There was no evidence that sightings categorized as unidentified represented technological developments or principles beyond the range of modern scientific knowledge. And 3. There is no evidence indicating that sightings categorized as unidentified were extraterrestrial vehicles. Alrighty then, I guess we're done here. But wait, in 1971, Science News published the following confident prediction.
Since 1968, the number of UFO sightings has dropped off, along with public interest in them. The scientific debunking of the UFO phenomena and the subsequent, though not necessarily connected, decline in sightings presents an interesting behavioral pattern. UFO reports usually run in 5-year cycles, and 1972 should be the start of another cycle.
Well, kids, never doubt the men and women of science, because those ETs weren't done with our planet, including Minnesota, yet. The decade's first Minnesota sighting was a January 1st event reported by the Fergus Falls Daily Journal. A local woman named Jerry Erickson explained,
I was lying in bed watching the Johnny Carson show. All my lights were off. Suddenly, the room was flooded with yellow-red light. I got up and looked out, and the entire northeast was lit up. Slowly, the lake faded. Got up in the sky and saw a reddish object, too big to be the taillight of a plane, moving toward the east. I watched it until it was out of sight.
Okay, that's not quite as exciting as the guy in the fishbowl helmet or the tin can critters. But the decade was young. Just as Science News predicted, what do they know? The big boom of UFO sightings kicked off in January 1972, way up in the icebox of the nation, International Falls, when a pair of grizzled trappers came out of the North Woods with a weird tale. As reported in the Minneapolis Star, Ellen Kolizewski, all these Polish names, was trapping around Namakan Lake in what is now Voyageurs National Park when...
One night last winter, the lights went out, and I thought the gasoline generator probably had shorted out. I went out to the back of the cabin and checked the machine, but I couldn't find anything wrong with it. Then I noticed the lights to the south toward the Minnesota shore of the lake. They were in a symmetrical row. The object was obscured by the sub-zero haze and didn't appear to have the shape of an outline structure, more like a mass. I would judge that it was about 90 feet high and perhaps a city block long. It just hovered over the ice. Then it lifted off and disappeared. But strangest of all, as soon as the object lifted off, the lights went on again. Just like that.
At about the same time, Horace Bowes was running a trap line on Gray Trout Lake just north of the border, and he saw something remarkably similar.
I saw a row of symmetrical lights. I'd guess the height of the object was about 90 feet, probably 300 to 400 feet long, eh? It just hovered over the lake for 3 or 4 minutes, long enough to get a good look, eh? Then it rose vertically in a fraction of a second and was gone.
Bowes, a manly man who once killed a black bear with a lumberman's pike, whatever that is, didn't know what he saw, but he knew what he didn't see.
It could have been some sort of experimental craft, or it could even have been some type of outer space vehicle. For sure it was not swamp gas or the Northern Lights though, eh?
Apparently the illegal aliens coming over the border weren't all Canadians, eh? Flash forward to the fall of 1973 and 3 sightings that came within days of each other. On October 17th, the Associated Press reported UFO fever spreads to Rochester. Yes, the home of the world-famous Mayo Clinic in southern Minnesota was buzzed from above. The Olmsted County Sheriff's Office fielded several calls, including one from a deputy sheriff on patrol of an object east of Stewartville flying quite high. The next night, according to the St. Cloud Daily Times, a patrolman named Bradford Roy from Mound, Minnesota, known the world over as the birthplace of the Tonka truck, observed a lighted flying pancake triangle about the size of a jet fighter. The object was subsequently spotted by 6 patrol cars and a Carver County patrolman. The Federal Aviation Administration Control Tower in St. Paul stated nothing was seen on its radar, a claim that Patrolman Roy, who declared himself a non-smoker and teetotaler, took umbrage with.
Yeah, well, they must be blind. First of all, what I saw was a very brilliant white light. Brilliant as a welding arc. I stopped my car. I went out. It went out. Moments later, it came on again. I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy, the way I thought others would that saw those lights. The brilliant white light extinguished. I could see a triangular object. On the nose was a small white light, a red flashing light below, and 2 very bright lights on the tail of the flying pancake triangle. That damn light very, very slowly was coming to me. It was 100 to 200 feet off the ground. There was no noise. The object hovered, then sped away about 50 miles an hour.
Then, on October 23rd, in the west central town of Perham, a couple of teenage boys on the way to a basketball game observed an object hovering over the school.
It was saucer-shaped, about 20 feet long, with a blaze orange dome on top. The bottom front of the main portion contained a recessed spotlight. It hovered over the school about 10 seconds, then rose and headed in a northern direction out of sight.
Things continued along in this vein, with scattered reports like the football-shaped object shooting green and red flames sighted in Paynesville, and objects hovering, darting, and blinking over Cass Lake, both in 1975, and a round object with spinning lights near Pelican Rapids in 1976. But the main event, the big kahuna of 70s sightings, came one dark night in August 1979, way up north in Marshall County, about 50 miles from the Canadian border. This incident, which has been called among the top 10 most significant encounters ever, began as just a normal night in northern Minnesota. Outside the tiny town of Stephen, Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson was patrolling the back roads looking for, I don't know, deer shiners, corn crop circle makers, Bigfoot? Anyway, it was close to 2 a.m., and it's a safe bet Val's patrol car was the only thing on that lonely road. Until something unexpected happened. According to Johnson's report, he observed a bright light ahead of him, apparently stationary and slightly above the roadway. Thinking it might be a small plane crash, he drove toward the glow, only for the light, which he later described as about a foot in diameter, kind of dinky for a spaceship, to suddenly rush toward him at high speed.
1 minute it was a mile and a half distance, and the next minute was right on me. It struck my vehicle. Everything got extremely, painfully bright. There was no object I could see at all. I heard the sound of breaking glass, and that's the last I remember.
When he regained consciousness, he was slumped over the steering wheel and his squad car severely damaged and parked at a right angle 800 feet further down the road than before. He fumbled for his radio and called in the incident saying,
"Something just hit my car. I don't know how to explain it. Strange. Something attacked my car. It wasn't a vehicle. I don't know what the hell it was."
Holy jeez. When his fellow officers arrived on the scene, they found Johnson outside his patrol car, looking the worse for wear. He had a bump on his forehead and his eyes hurt, he told his colleagues. A doctor later diagnosed him with something like welder's burns on his face and eyes, and recent dental work was fractured inside his mouth. Ouch! The car was in even worse shape. Its windshield was cracked in a spiderwebby pattern, 2 antennae were bent at weird angles, there was a dime-sized ding in the hood, and a hole in one of the flashers on top of the car. Johnson found that both the dashboard clock and his own wristwatch had lost 14 minutes. Even more alarming, it appeared the deputy sheriff had been unconscious for nearly 40 minutes. So what did Deputy Sheriff Johnson encounter on that isolated country road? Both the Federal Aviation Administration and Air Force confirmed there was no air traffic in the area that night. Representatives from the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois visited and conducted magnetic studies on the car without finding anything much. An engineer from Honeywell, Roland Wardell, drove up from the cities to do his own research, ultimately concluding with the precision of a true scientist that it was a highly charged electrical thing with enough mass and momentum to break the left headlight, crack the windshield, bend the antennas, disrupt the car's electrical system, and stop both the car clock and Johnson's watch.
I found no earthly explanation that could cause all of these things. We live in an age that tells us there are likely civilizations more advanced than ours. We, as a civilization, are accomplishing extensive space travel. We know how to use intense electrical fields for accelerating particles and producing forces. In this case, we cannot rule out some kind of vehicle from outer space.
In the wake of the Val Johnson incident, as it came to be known in UFO circles, a number of other locals came forward to report their own close encounters with the unknown. For instance, the assistant administrator of the hospital in the town of Warren, about 20 miles from Stephen, reported that he and his wife were driving one night when a bright light hovering over the trees suddenly dived toward them and hovered over their car before speeding off. As for Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson, he reported feeling down in the dumps, like I had mental difficulty in the days after the incident, but ultimately made his peace with the occurrence. As he reflected months later,
I feel I was neutralized. They didn't mean me any harm. I could have rolled in the ditch, but I went straight for 800 feet. If it was an alien, I stumbled across something I probably wasn't supposed to see. That's as good an explanation as I've been able to come up with.
after making a few media appearances, including a segment on the popular TV series That's Incredible, Val Johnson stepped out of the UFO spotlight. He turned down a $1,000 offer from the National Enquirer to be hypnotized, left law enforcement, departed the state of Minnesota, and declined to attend the 40th anniversary celebration of his encounter held in Warren in 2019. Incidentally, the famous squad car is on display at the Historical Society in Warren if you'd care to inspect it yourself.
Some may say it's a little surprising that Val Johnson is so determined to distance himself from the incident. Could it be that something ominous occurred during those 14 minutes, an experience so traumatizing that Johnson has deeply repressed it? Is it possible the aliens who abducted the patrolman inserted mental blocking to keep him from remembering? Val Johnson, who is happily retired in Wisconsin, would probably say no. But alien abductee investigators? They say, oh, you betcha.
Next time on The UFTA Files.